Hello and welcome. My guest today started out studying medicine. He left that to join politics. He has been the president of Ethiopia and is currently the prime minister of the country. He sees opportunities today with India, especially in the new world economic order. And he believes that Ethiopia and India can do a lot more together in the future. About a debate in your country about the issue of giving land to foreigners, especially in view of the fact that privatization of land in Ethiopia is also being debated. Currently, all the land is held by the government. Do you think that this would in some way dampen the initiative that you've taken of leasing land to farmers from India who can come here, develop the farming and sell the crops in an open market?
I think there is some misplaced fear of so-called land grab stoked by people who should know better. Of course, we are aware of the history of land grab in Africa. It happened at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century. The land grab in Zimbabwe, for example, resulted in more than 70% of arable land in Zimbabwe being owned by a few white farmers from Europe. Same applies to South Africa. Now, people who should know better about the circumstances of this land grab are now transposing this onto the rest of the continent in a completely different environment. In the case of Ethiopia, for example, as you rightly indicated, private land ownership is not allowed. All land is publicly owned. And therefore the possibility of a land grab simply does not exist. Secondly, what we are doing is putting all unutilized land in this country. And we have a lot of unutilized land in the lowlands of Ethiopia. We have land scarcity in the highlands, where over 80% of the population lives. But we have abundant unutilized land in the lowlands. What we have done is to build infrastructure in those areas and therefore open up the area for investment, both by domestic and foreign private sector, on the basis of a clearly set out lease arrangement. Now that is a win-win arrangement. It is not a land grab. And therefore we are very comfortable with the fact that we have put in place all the necessary guidelines, environmental and otherwise, to make sure that everybody benefits from this exercise. And we welcome Indian private investment in agricultural development of our country. And it's not just Indians who are investing in Ethiopia in agriculture. There are people from the Middle East who are also investing in agriculture in Ethiopia. And so we believe the fear of foreigners grabbing our land is completely misplaced.
At the same time, Indians have suffered in the past in some countries in Africa where they've been asked to leave when a regime changes. In this case, there will be a concern that if your government is giving this land on long lease, which could be 50 years, subsequent governments may reverse the policy. Is there any risk of that?
I don't think there's going to be any risk of that for a number of reasons. First, these lease agreements that we are signing with Indian as well as other foreign companies are precisely designed to make sure that everybody benefits. Once people begin to see the results of the investments in terms of job creation, availability of foreign exchange, availability of various agricultural products in our markets and so on, they will see the benefits for themselves. And it would be completely irrational for them to try to shoot themselves on the foot. And so the benefit of the investment will, in my view, be its ultimate protection. And secondly, we have a constitutional order here. And the Constitution clearly states that you do not empower, you do not grab property from anybody. There is a rule of law here, and it is firmly entrenched in our system, and that provides additional and, in my view, adequate protection to all investments, including agricultural investments.
You said some time ago that this will be your last term as Prime Minister, and you would not stand for elections for the next term. For a person who's been very active for decades and at the helm of affairs, what is it that you plan to do in the future after you give up the current role of Prime Minister?
Take a bit of rest. I think I deserve to take a bit of rest.
Would that be easy for a person who works all the time and who's physically and mentally absolutely on the ball?
Like all transitions, it might have its challenge, but I think it will also have its rewards. I'll be able to reflect on the past few decades, perhaps write some things which could be of some interest and some value for future generations of Ethiopians. Get out of the hurly-burly of daily political activity and see how these things look when you have the time to reflect on them.
So when you look back at your years, what is it that really stretched you and you felt that it was very challenging? Was it the time that you had to clamp down and over 100 civilians lost their lives? Or was it the war that you had to go through? Or was it was the Nile water issue the most challenging that you've had to face?
Well, all of those were very challenging. 17 years of armed struggle against a very well entrenched regime could not but be a challenge. The border war we had with Eritrea was a challenge. The disturbances we had in 2005 after the elections was a heart-rending challenge. And there were many other challenging periods. But for me, the most important challenge has been one that is not noticed by everybody, not noticed by anybody indeed, which is the internal party debate on how to move forward and where to move, which was conducted some 10 years ago.
So you're not talking about the time after the war with Eritrea, where you had the internal party challenge?
That is immediately after the end of the war with Eritrea. We had a very challenging situation within the party. The party was almost was on the verge of disintegration. In the end, we scraped through, and as they say, the darkest moment in the night is just before dawn. And few years later, 1 or 2 years later, we began this.
We wish you luck in the future, and thank you for sharing your views with us.
Thank you.